What's up guys, my name is Nathan and welcome to Hale. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about Criterion collecting. For those who are not very familiar with the Criterion collection, I'll explain a little bit about it. The Criterion collection is dedicated to gathering the greatest films from around the world and publishing them in editions of the highest technical quality, with supplemental features that enhance the appreciation of the art of film. These may be movies that you've never even heard of, or they may even be movies that you have heard of, but for one reason or another, there is belief that they should be remembered through time, they don't want to be forgotten, and so the company, the Criterion Collection, they restore the movies, they give them a great new restoration so they look a lot cleaner, a lot better on your screen, but they also add supplements or special features so that you can see the process of the making of the movie, you can watch interviews, read biographies of the actors, all that fun stuff. Each Criterion movie comes with these supplements, but they also come with booklets which include film essays and information about the Blu-ray transfer. Each Criterion is also labeled with a number, and this is in order of the release date. So for an example, this edition of The Lodger is spine number 885. So it was the 885th Criterion released. And you can find that right on the spine. And so I've been collecting Criterions for about 5 years now. And my collection is definitely far from the largest on YouTube, but it is something that I do have a passion in, and I'm a fan of collecting these. The only con of Criterion collecting is each movie is priced at about $40 each, some even more expensive. But lo and behold, Barnes & Noble has a sale 2 times a year in July and November where they list all the Criterions at 50% off. So they're only $20, which some may argue is still an expensive price, but when you consider what you're buying, all the supplements that are included, the restoration of the film and all that jazz, it really is a pretty good deal. I have fallen in love with collecting Criterions, and my hope for today is to give you a few recommendations to start your collection or to continue your collection. As I've collected Criterions through the years, I've noticed that there are several titles that I believe everyone should just own just because they're very important movies. But I also believe that there are certain genres that people should own, or certain directors' movies that people should own. And so my hope today is to recommend some new Criterions to you. If you already own them, great. If you don't, then you should buy them. But more so, just help you understand how to start Criterion collecting and where to start, because there are now over 1,000 movie titles in the collection, and the collection is only growing. And so it can be a little hard to know where to start or what to buy next. So here are just a few of my recommendations. So I've listed off several movies that I think are important for everyone to own, or at least several genres or several actors' movies, several directors' movies. And so without further ado, let's get started. The first category I want to talk about is foreign language films. I believe it's absolutely essential that if you want to collect Criterions, you own at least one foreign language film. The one that I want to showcase today is Diabolique. Diabolique was directed by H.D. Clouseau. It is spine number 35, and it was a movie that I became familiar with on Filmstruck, which was an old movie viewing site where you could watch a lot of Criterion movies online, but I instantly fell in love with it. It is a French horror film, and I do love horror films. It's black and white from the 50s, and it was also the first foreign language film that I watched all the way through. But out of all the foreign language films I've ever seen, Diabolique still stands as my favorite. The next category I want to talk about is silent films. I believe it's essential for every Criterion collector to own at least one silent movie in their collection. The one that I want to showcase today is The Lodger, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It was one of his first films, actually. Personally, I'm not a big fan of silent films. However, I think it is important that you own at least one silent film because it is important to just see how movies were made in that time period. Although silent films aren't my favorite capacity of film to watch, when I am watching them, I always appreciate what I'm watching. With that being said, I don't own too many silent films, unfortunately, in my collection, and that's something I do want to change. I would like to buy a few more silent films. As far as what silent films to buy, The Lodger probably isn't the first one that you should buy. It's one I would recommend because it's a fun, scary movie from Alfred Hitchcock, but there are so many silent films out there that I would definitely look into it before you just buy anything. This next category is an actor/director that I think everyone must own at least one movie of his. That is Charlie Chaplin, and the one I'm going to showcase is Modern Times. We were just talking about silent films. If you're looking for a good place to start with silent films, Charlie Chaplin would also be a great place to start with that. The reason I recommend Charlie Chaplin films is because he really is the king of comedy. He was really one of the first comedians to hit the big screen, and many people are familiar with his silent films. He has also released several talkies, but I feel like he's most famous for his silent films and a certain character that he has in all of his silent films called the Tramp. This character is comedic, but also has a ginormous heart, is very loving, and is usually willing to do anything for anyone. And so mix that with the silent film era, which was a very innocent time period for movies, and you've got just masterpieces galore. Modern Times was actually a movie that I just saw recently for the first time, and I absolutely fell in love with it. But as far as Charlie Chaplin films go, I feel like any one that's been released on the Criterion Collection is a safe bet to buy. I would recommend getting either Modern Times, City Lights, The Gold Rush, or The Kid. Taking a step back to kind of the foreign language film genre, there's a certain director that I feel every Criterion collector should own. That is, own at least one of his titles. That is Akira Kurosawa, and the film I'm going to showcase is Seven Samurai. Not only should everyone own at least one Akira Kurosawa film, but everyone should own Seven Samurai. Seven Samurai is not a movie that I've seen many times. In fact, I've only seen it once, but it is a movie that I plan on watching again sometime in my life, mostly because it is so important to film history. If you look at Seven Samurai, there are so many movies that were inspired from Seven Samurai. For one, Magnificent Seven was inspired by Seven Samurai, and now they have remakes of Magnificent Seven. Akira Kurosawa is just a very iconic movie director. He has directed many movies that have inspired movie directors that we have today. For an example, Star Wars was inspired from Akira Kurosawa's films. But if there's one to start off on, I would definitely recommend it being Seven Samurai. Now, as I mentioned before, Criterion movies aren't only movies that you've never heard of. There may be some movies in the collection that you're very familiar with, or movies from directors that you're very familiar with. The next director I want to talk about is no stranger to you, I'm sure, and that is Alfred Hitchcock. I think it is important for everyone to own at least one Alfred Hitchcock movie in their collection. I showcased The Lodger earlier in this video, but for this category, I'm going to showcase actually the classic Hitchcock collection. This collection comes with The Lady Vanishes, The 39 Steps, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Foreign Correspondent, none of which I've actually seen. However, I've seen many of his other movies in the collection, including The Lodger, Rebecca, and Notorious. And all those movies are great, especially Notorious. And if you're really interested in Alfred Hitchcock, I would also recommend buying the boxed set. I got it for a pretty cheap price, and I've noticed that it goes on sale pretty often. There's some movies in the Criterion Collection that I feel everyone needs to own just for the fact that the movies are absolutely excellent. Not only are they some of the best in the Criterion Collection, they're some of the best movies of all time. This next movie is not from a specific director, not a specific genre, but it's simply a movie that I think everyone needs to own. It was the first Criterion that I ever bought, and that is 12 Angry Men. If you haven't seen 12 Angry Men, I would actually recommend this be the first Criterion you buy, or if you're already collecting Criterions and for some reason you don't own this one yet, make sure that this is the next one that you buy. 12 Angry Men is an amazing movie, a movie that is simple in plot, but when you watch it, it's an absolute explosion on the screen. It's a film that every time I revisit, I like it more somehow, and I think it's one that everyone needs to view at least 3 times in their life. The next category I want to talk about are blind buys. Something that I absolutely love about the Criterion Collection is that when I'm buying Criterions at Barnes & Noble, it's pretty safe to say that any one that I buy is going to be a film that I at least enjoy. It may not be my new favorite movie of all time, but by the time the credits roll, chances are I'm going to have liked the film. And that's simply because it was released on the Criterion Collection, and they normally release movies that they find important enough for everyone to watch. Movies that they find well enough received for people to enjoy. So I don't have a problem blind buying movies. With that being said, I think it's fun for every Criterion collector to blind buy at least one Criterion. The one that I'm going to showcase today is Wages of Fear. Wages of Fear is another movie directed by H.G. Clouseau. He was the one I mentioned earlier who directed Diabolique, and it is also a foreign language film. There's a little bit of English here and there, but the majority of it is a foreign language film. I blind bought this out of curiosity because I loved Diabolique so much, so I wanted to see more of the director's work, and when I saw the movie, I was absolutely floored. It is the most suspenseful movie I've ever seen in my life. The plot follows 4 men who accept a job to transport nitroglycerin to a location. The only problem is the trip over is very bumpy, very dangerous, and so they have to drive in a very strategic way. You can imagine as the viewer, it is a very suspenseful thrill ride, seeing as how if they make one mistake, their whole truck could blow up. So I definitely recommend seeing and buying Wages of Fear. Now those are the few categories that I would recommend starting off on, making sure that you own a foreign language film, you own a silent film, you own a film by Akira Kurosawa and all the other ones that I mentioned. But now I just want to simply talk about a few additional Criterion titles that don't fall under a certain category, but these are movies that I like, I enjoy, and I recommend them to other people. So take it for what it's worth. Here are a few more recommendations. To Be or Not to Be, directed by Ernst Lubitsch. This is a dark comedy on World War II. It makes fun of Hitler hardcore, and so that is very entertaining. But at the heart of it, it's also a romantic film and a pretty suspenseful film too. If you're a fan of that time era, I would definitely recommend buying it. Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is one of those movies that has been released on the Criterion Collection that you have probably heard of before, but I would recommend that if you haven't seen it, you definitely watch it and buy this Criterion. The movie is very witty, the stop motion animation is beautiful, And like 12 Angry Men, I find that every time I rewatch it, I like it a little more. Wild Strawberries. Wild Strawberries is a film directed by Ingmar Bergman, and you'll find that Ingmar Bergman has a lot of Criterion movies in the Criterion collection. In fact, they have a whole entire edition set aside just for his films. But the reason I don't have a category set aside just for Ingmar Bergman films is because he's the director that I got more into the more I watch Criterion films. And it might be the same for you, it might not be. Wild Strawberries is a great movie, and I would highly recommend it. It's a film about a senior citizen who fears death and his travels to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award. Umberto D. Umberto D is just a simple story, but I fell in love with it. It's heartwarming, it's sad, and if you like movies such as It's a Wonderful Life, then you might just appreciate Umberto D. The next two movies I'm going to recommend only because they star my favorite actor of all time, that's Jimmy Stewart, and the two movies are Philadelphia Story and Anatomy of a Murder. It really is a shame that there aren't more Jimmy Stewart movies in the Criterion collection. There are very little. In fact, I think it's just these two right here. But you can't go wrong with these two movies. Philadelphia Story is a romantic comedy. Anatomy of a Murder is a courtroom movie. And if you're a fan of either of those two genres, then you're likely to enjoy these two movies. And the final movie I want to direct is directed by Stanley Kubrick, which is also a director that you should look into in the Criterion collection. The reason I want to recommend this one is because it was another blind buy, and it was one of the first Criterions I ever bought, and that is Paths of Glory. I recommend Paths of Glory mostly because I think it is a very important movie for everyone to watch. It is a war film, but it doesn't take place on the battlefield as much as other war films you've seen. Paths of Glory focuses more on the sidelines of war, more on the logistics of rules. It's an enjoyable film, but it's also a pretty sad film, so be prepared for that. And that's all I have for you guys today. Those are just a few recommendations. There are several other Criterion movies that I love that I would love to show, but this video is already running pretty long. I want this video to be a source for other YouTubers to find Criterion movies that they want to buy. And so I'm going to ask you guys to do me a favor. Leave a comment in the comment section below of Criterions that you would recommend for new Criterion collectors or for returning Criterion collectors. And if you want to be so kind to leave an explanation of why you recommend those movies, please do so. These are just a few of my recommendations. There are still so many Criterion movies out there that I want to own. But out of the ones I own, here are the ones I recommend. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions about the Criterion collection, please also ask them in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later.